Let's be real. Lawsuits are no fun, but with Paulson & Nace, at least they are a little easier. With two DC-born partners, Paulson & Nace will fight for you the way only a Washingtonian could. Paulson & Nace handles medical malpractice, wrongful death, and other complex injury cases involving negligence. So if you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Paulson & Nace for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.paulsonandnace.com or call 202-463-1999.
Today on CityCast DC. If you've ever had to go while out and about in DC, I've got some good news. Throne Labs, a high-tech toilet company, is bringing public bathrooms to 5 different locations in the city as part of the DC Public Restroom Pilot Program. DC's track record with public bathrooms has been iffy at best. Jonathan Katz joined us a while back to explain why this is a big deal for everyone. It's Wednesday, April 10th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. I'm here with Jonathan Katz. He lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, works for the federal government in D.C., but he's here in his personal capacity. Jonathan has done a lot of research on public restrooms. Jonathan, thank you for being here today. I know that I have been caught before desperately needing a bathroom in the city. Has this ever happened to you?
Absolutely. And this is actually how I got started getting interested in restrooms. I'm originally from New York, and I lived in New York for a while after finishing college. And I had a UTI in 2016, a urinary tract infection. And afterwards, when I needed to pee, I really needed to pee. And New York City, where I lived at the time, not a lot of public restrooms. So it got to the point where for every single station on my commute, I knew where the nearest accessible public restroom was.
You've used the term potty parity. Why does this matter? Why should folks care about this issue?
So potty parity as a term actually originates in feminist movements because people with uteruses need to urinate a little bit more often than men, and they take longer because of the shape of the urethra. But the problem is that if you have 50-50 bathrooms, that's actually not equitable for how much people need to use them, on top of which there's a disproportionate number of restrooms for cis men, like myself. But what's really important is that this equality goes beyond it because some people lack restroom access. So, for example, people experiencing homelessness or many trans folks. Some people lack adequate restroom access. So, for example, people with disabilities or older adults, people with dementia. And some people lack access to restrooms that really serve their needs. So, for example, someone who's traveling with a toddler that might need diaper changes, or someone who needs a wheelchair accessible restroom or a restroom without non-slip surfaces. And what this means is that then people who have, say, additional restroom needs, say they need to go more often, or when they go, they really need to go, they have a digestive thing, or if they're just someone who pees a lot or has other needs, it means that people end up having to kind of plan their outings around, can they get to a bathroom? On top of which, it can lead to very painful situations, very humiliating situations. And so making sure that we have adequate restroom access is really important so that people can really participate in public life and then go about their day and not have to even plan, say basic errands or their commutes around, hey, can I get to a bathroom in time?
So there's been some recent legislation introduced by Brooke Pinto that would require the Department of Parks and Rec to include public bathrooms in new or substantially renovated parks that are 1 acre large or bigger. What are your thoughts on this bill?
I think this is a great first step to expanding public restroom access here in the district. But I do have one question and one issue. My question is, why is there a limitation to having it in parks of 1 acre? Now, there may be some very good reasons around funding or how these parks are built or constructed. And this is something that I'd like to see a little bit more reasoning on. My other issue is that there's a mandate that they would be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. However, people need the bathroom all day. And especially many parks, a lot of the traffic is actually early in the morning. And then, of course, in the summer, later at night. But these are really key times when the restroom is actually needed, not just by folks who tend to need more public restroom access, people with disabilities, older adults, pregnant women, and people experiencing homelessness, but also just anyone who's in the park in general. And I think really the longer and more hours you can have a bathroom open, that's really good. But other than that, I think it's a first step. I think it's really great, and I think it's really going to have a good impact on restroom access here in Greater Washington.
This episode is brought to you by ShipStation. If you run an e-commerce business, you know how much work it takes to produce something great while dealing with complicated shipping issues. That's why over 130,000 companies have turned to ShipStation, an innovative tool that allows you to focus less on shipping and more on building your brand. With ShipStation, you can manage orders, label printing, reporting, and customer service on one easy-to-use dashboard. You'll reduce warehouse costs with reliable enterprise solutions and save thousands on shipping costs with discounts up to 89% off. Plus, you can effortlessly import orders from everywhere you sell online. So, turn your shipping challenges into opportunities for growth. Go to ShipStation.com and use code POD to sign up for your free 60-day trial. That's ShipStation.com, code POD.
Sephora stores are everywhere you are. So just pop in. When you need a brown lip to match your 90s playlist, a confidence boost before your interview, or a last-minute gift for mom's birthday. There's always a Sephora near you. Just pop in. Use our store locator to find your local Sephora or Sephora at Kohl's.
Nationally, the conversation around restrooms has been about the ways in which it's a gender issue. Do you think that these public restrooms should be gender neutral?
Yes, for many trans and non-binary folks, being put into that situation where they have to pick a binary gender can not only be very unaffirming, it can actually be physically dangerous if they get attacked by cis folks when they go into that restroom. It's also important to have gender-neutral single-user restrooms for two other reasons. Is that one, a lot of people really cannot eliminate installs. There's a condition called paruresis, which is anxiety around public urination or defecation. And for many people, it just basically means that they actually can't get it out. And so having that single user restroom is really helpful. But secondly, many people with disabilities travel with caregivers, care partners who may not be of the same gender as them. And so they need to actually be able to go in with their care partner in order to even be able to use the restroom. And this is particularly the case for many older adults who will be traveling with a spouse. They're not necessarily able to go through all the motions on their own. They need some assistance. There's no shame in that. But the thing is that you need to have a bathroom that can actually accommodate that. A lot of public restrooms currently, the stalls are so small that not only they're not wheelchair accessible, but if someone can't go in with another person, that person might not be able to use that restroom. And that's important because oftentimes people have been pushed out for saying, oh, why are you bringing a woman with you into the men's restroom? And that guy needs that care partner to help him actually use the restroom. So I think it's important from a queer perspective. It's also important from a disability perspective, and it's important from a lot of other perspectives. But the people who are most affected by the lack of gender-neutral bathrooms are trans folks. Trans folks experience significantly higher rates of urinary incontinence conditions because of how much they have to hold it in and the damage that that then does to the bladder wall, to the urethra.
Yeah, so as we talk about the ways in which this is really an accessibility issue, without public restrooms that are accessible, the only real options would be to hold it in and risk all of these health factors that you spoke about, or, go in your pants, which is so inhumane. I guess I wonder, what happens if you are busted for public urination in DC?
So in DC, it's a fine of several $100s or up to 90 days of jail time. I live in Maryland. Here in Montgomery County, it's actually $1,000 and up to 6 months in jail. Prince George's County is much more lenient. It's only $50, but it's still a very humiliating situation, especially if someone has an accident and they wet their pants or defecate in their pants, or if they get caught or if they get called out on it. And that experience of public humiliation is an incredibly damaging experience psychologically. And then with the legal aspect, it's like many other things in this country, who gets called out on it? And as I've told folks, it's not usually white bargoers in Navy Yard at 3 a.m. Another thing I think that always gets forgotten is that public urination, public defecation is also unsanitary for many reasons, but particularly for the person who's doing it, because you don't have the access to the hand washing. You don't necessarily have access to a clean place to even do it. So there's so many impacts just beyond the legal thing as well.
Yeah, so I have heard so many arguments against public restrooms. You've laid out this very good case for it, but people who are against proposals like this, they often talk about sort of unsavory things that might happen in public restrooms, drugs, alcohol, sex. What is your response to people who say that?
So my rather salty response is that there is no design of a public restroom that will prevent these things from happening. And that's just because people will do weird things in public restrooms, no matter how many security things you put in place, no matter how many barriers you put in place. And I think the other thing is that, when we think about drugs, when we think about alcohol, it's like, well, what kind of supports are we providing for people who live with substance use disorder? What sort of supports are we providing for people who are living with alcoholism? And I think that's something to consider as well. But also another thing is that those kind of questions then take away from the focus of, well, what are the impacts of not having public restrooms? Now, it's oftentimes there's a distance between unsavory things might happen and people can't go out and about in public because they're worried about restroom access.
Absolutely. So are there places in the DC, Maryland area where you feel that potty parity is sort of done right, where they're getting it right and doing a good job?
So two immediate examples that come to mind. Something that I've been trying to pay a lot of attention to is the availability of adult changing tables, because not only do many children need diapers, but there are many adults with disabilities who rely on diapers and other continence products as well. And they oftentimes need a place where a care partner or they themselves can change their diaper. And BWI, Baltimore Washington Airport, actually has an adult changing table post security between concourses B and C. And I think that's really great because it's an example of a very public place that's done a lot of thinking about making sure that they have gender neutral restrooms, that they have restrooms where they have adult changing tables that are very accessible, that there are single user restrooms available in such a crowded and well-trafficked place. Another place that I was looking through, Planet Word, which is the linguistics museum in the district, they actually won an award for their public restrooms. But what I really liked about it is not only do they have single-user accessible restrooms, but that restroom actually has adequate counter space. And that's important for two reasons. One is that people who have colostomy bags or people who are, say, administering insulin or other injected medicine both need that privacy, but also that sanitary space to lay out their stuff and to do things. And the second thing is that a lot of times what I've noticed is accessible restrooms don't include places for people to dispose of menstrual products like tampons, sanitary pads, and that place actually has it in a very prominent wheelchair accessible spot. And I think that's really good because it seems that people forget that many disabled people menstruate, and that's a key reason that people go into the restroom.
Oh, I was just there last week, and I specifically remember thinking, these are nice facilities. Like, this was a nice place to go to the bathroom.
Yes, they do a really good job.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. And Jonathan, thank you for advocating for, gender justice, disability justice, human rights through potty parity.
Thank you very much. This was a lot of fun, and I hope to continue contributing.
Okay, so you might recall that in our previous version of this episode, we ranted about Metro's bathrooms being subpar. We recently caught up with Jonathan to get his take on the recent Metro bathroom innovations. Here's what he had to say.
So Metro's opened up its station bathrooms for customers, and this is a really big step, and it's really important, and it really does allow a lot more people to use Metro and to use Metro comfortably. And even though there are some improvements that I'll talk about, this is really great, and definitely let Metro know that you are in favor of this policy and that this policy is an improvement because it means that people can go where they need to go and go when they need to go. Now, I will say that I think the way it's set up in news stations is a lot better because the bathrooms are easy to find and you don't need to talk to anyone to get there. So, for example, if you go to the Potomac Yard station or the Ashburn station, both news stations, the bathrooms are very easy to find. In the older stations, they're usually inside the service areas, which means you need to talk to the customer service representatives in the desk. And this is going to be a barrier for some people, particularly people who don't speak English very well or have communication disabilities, and for many people who are unhoused, because there is a lot of bias. And many times the customer service representatives haven't been trained yet on how to work with folks from different backgrounds. I know that when I've asked to use the bathroom, I have a slight hearing disability. Sometimes I've been like, maybe this person isn't used to the fact that someone might not hear as well in the crowded station. But that said, I've taken advantage of these restrooms a few times. They are generally clean, which I think is really great. I'm originally from New York. The bathrooms in New York are nowhere near as nice as the WMATA bathrooms, and they're actually cleaner than many of the coffee shop or mall bathrooms or other bathrooms we might have used in its place. So it's definitely they're good bathrooms. Some of them are really big. The one in the Columbia Heights station is weirdly large. But, even if they're hidden and hard to get to, they're definitely a good amenity. And if you do find any issues with accessing Metro bathrooms, really, we need people to let Metro know where to improve and where to do things better, because this is how you get bathrooms to be more accessible. It's not just a one and done. You have a bathroom, but you also let people know why the bathrooms are important and what can be improved. So, for example, I definitely have written into Metro letting them know that, if it's hard for me to hear the customer service representative, it might push me off from using the Metro bathroom, because I'm not going to necessarily say, here are their directions on how to access the bathroom. But yeah, keep up the advocacy, and to Metro, thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend who's psyched about Metro opening their restrooms. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.